Hey, it's me, Karlos. Welcome back to another episode of the fun, buggy, outdated game called Dark Souls Remastered. This video format will be a bit different from my previous ones. I have here some recorded footage, and instead of it being a normal playthrough episode, I'm gonna be narrating over it. I thought that this way of tackling the next segment of the game would be faster for you than normal playthrough episodes. Let me know if you enjoy it. If you remember from the previous episode, our fun little trek through Anor Londo ended with us acquiring the Lord Vessel, an item that allowed us to warp between certain bonfires, which made our return to Firelink Shrine much faster. But now, it's time that we take on the first step of our new objective. Talking to Frank will trigger this dialogue.
Heavens, you have done it. You have retrieved the Lord Vessel. After 1,000 years, it is you. It is really you.
Should I really be listening to you about my destiny?
Forgive me. I really should calm down. Now, let us take that vessel on a journey. I assume that you are ready. Now, be still.
Be still? What are you gonna do? Cast it up. Whoa, wait! Ah! 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 Spit me out, I'm not into porn. This is a kid-friendly channel. Ow! Ugh. Alright, where'd you take me? We find out that Framt has taken us to the Firelink altar and instructs us to place the Lord Vessel on the altar. After doing such, Framt instructs us, the successor of Lord Gwyn, on our next task.
To achieve your fate, fill the vessel with powerful souls, commensurate to the great soul of Gwyn. Scarce few possess such brilliant souls. Gravelord Nito, the Witch of Izalith, the 4 kings of New Londo, who inherited the shards of Gwyn's soul, and Lord Gwyn's former confidant, Seath, the Scaleless. All of their souls are required to satiate the Lord Vessel.
And with that, we return to Firelink Shrine. To begin our journey, I had to decide on which of the 4 lords to take on first. And after a bit of consideration, I decided to start with the edgelord of the group, Nito, the first of the dead. To find Nito, I had to descend down into the catacombs. Now, I have no footage of this, but I actually did go down this path off camera before. Which is why I may see some shortcuts unlocked and bonfires lit all the way down even in the Tomb of the Giants, which we will find ourselves in later on. All you really need to know about that is that I did end up getting the Rite of Kindling, and also a Dark Moon Seance ring that I led myself into a death trap to get, and which I will never use. But I digress, viewer. Let me take you through a tour of the catacombs. If you find yourself unable to run away from the many oddly athletic skeletons down here, you'll be needing a divine or holy weapon. This is because I didn't demonstrate this in the video, so just take my word for it. This is because the skeletons down here don't die from normal weapons, no matter how much you cut them down. If you're a strength melee fighter like me who knows no miracle spells or has no interest in leveling faith that much, then the Astora's Straight Sword is a good weapon for the job. I found it in the Valley of the Drakes, next to an undead dragon who proceeded to kill me very easily after waking up. This sword has a pretty low faith requirement. As long as you put a few points into dex as well, you'll be able to wield it no problem. Just be careful when fighting the skeletons, they can parry you. Also, if it's your first time going through this area, there should be enemy necromancers along with the skeletons, but they don't really respawn when you kill them, so don't worry about them too much. They have a rare chance of dropping a skull lantern, which you will need later on. Down this dark hole here is the last bonfire of the catacombs before we enter the next area, but we're not going down there yet. It benefits you to stay attentive in the catacombs, not only because of the endless waves of those who live in death, but also because there's a secret bonfire you can unlock down here through an illusory wall. Just be wary of the spike statue. Beside the illusory wall bonfire is a ladder up to a switch, which unlocks this bridge towards an additional area. In this area we'll find more skeletons and a breakable wall which leads to the Dark Moon Seance ring I told you about earlier. Just be ready to die when you get it. Otherwise I hope you're good at dodging. When you're done with that, continue on. You might have seen these floating red skulls around the catacombs a lot. I advise you to stay away from them, because they'll explode if they get too close. Ah, and this is the Hall of Coffins. I didn't really explore much of this area on my first time around, so I wonder what what's that doing down here? I'll nestle in that coffin later. For now, I have a demon to kill. I haven't played this game in a bit before recording this, so I was a bit rusty. This Titanite demon was supposed to be a pretty easy fight. They're slow and their telegraphs are as easy to read as a preschool reading exercise. This one is weaker than the one in Anor Londo was as well, so you should be able to defeat it after acquiring the Lord Vessel. The problem is, I got greedy a lot and mistimed a lot of dodges. Couple that with almost a month of not playing the game and... Titanite demons apparently have a grab attack. I didn't know that. Oh well, I guess I better run back there and try again. And so, gathering up my dignity, I attempt to fight again. However, this second attempt proved to be unsuccessful as well. When you fight slow enemies in Dark Souls, something important to keep in mind is to not be greedy. Just because they're slow doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to win if you're not careful. Oh, and also be good at dodge timing. I only have entry level dodging skills at best, so... Anyway, the Titanite demon went down without a hitch on my third attempt. As I swallowed down a drink of my flask, I wondered to myself if I'm even worthy of slaying these four lords, if it takes me 3 tries to defeat a foe of that caliber. Alright, Titanite demon down, now to nestle in this coffin, and rather eagerly I did. And I waited, and waited, and waited. I waited in the darkness for what felt like hours. Soon I lost track of time. For all I know, it would have already been a day, or a week, months, years. But just as I felt my consciousness slipping away, this happened. I awoke from a short slumber and climbed out of my musty, dank coffin to find myself in Tomb of the Giants. That's strange. I went down that area before and I don't recognize this place at all. It's not as dark as I remember at least. I walked around the cavern for a bit, but there didn't seem to be an exit or anything much at all, except for this large open coffin containing a figure called the Gravelord. He looked somewhat like Nito from the cutscene, and the game had an option to pray to it. An option to join the covenant that might belong to a lord that I have to kill? Sign me up! But after I did that, I looked up some information on the internet about this covenant, and it turns out that it's online PvP based. Well, that's useless to me. Time to leave. Mark my words, Nito. The next time we meet will be the moment you'll die. Well, now that I think about it, killing the Lord of the Dead seems pretty counterintuitive. But this is Dark Souls, and we've already learned throughout our journey that if you want a soul, something has to die. And if I have to kill something that might technically already be dead, then so be it. Retracing our steps, we come back to this dark hole I mentioned earlier. In order to get down to the bottom without dying, one has to be sure of foot. So make sure to land on the small ledge across that small room, and then drop down accordingly. Here we'll find ourselves in the last bonfire of the catacombs, which I could have just warped to, but I wanted to give you the full experience of traversing the area. Across the hall where the bonfire is, you'll find a skeleton blacksmith. So if you're looking to upgrade or repair your weapons, just talk to him whenever. I'm sure he won't mind. There should be a hole in the wall between the blacksmith and the bonfire. Now, listen to me. The moment you exit through that hole, start running as fast as you can. Run! Don't look back. Dodge and weave, go, 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 go! Okay, now, if it's your first time arriving to this point of the game, there will be a fog wall in front of you. Pass on through and the wheel skeletons won't follow you in. You'll find yourself in a giant coffin where you will have to fight a boss named Pinwheel to get the right of kindling. Don't fret, he's legitimately the easiest boss in the game. Just don't panic and avoid getting hit by his fire. After you deal with that guy, climb up the 2 sets of ladders, and after carefully navigating across this coffin bridge, you should be able to find yourself in the Tomb of the Giants. Now I know what you're thinking. Karlos, this area looks really dark. You don't even seem like you can see more than 2 feet in front of you. And to that, I say, yes, 75% of the whole area will be like this. While it's true that you can theoretically get through the whole area practically blind like this, using a skull lantern or any other item that helps you see in dark places is immensely helpful. As I said earlier, they drop from catacomb necromancers, but you can also find some down here later on. It gives you about 7.5 feet of range, which may not sound like a lot at first, but it makes all of the difference if a giant skeleton starts charging at you from the darkness. And speaking of them, they're pretty easy to defeat since their attacks are really telegraphed, they have a big hitbox, and by now you should have a weapon strong enough to take them down in a couple hits. At least you won't have to fight ones this big. If you don't have a skull lantern or something, just follow what I'm doing if you want to get through the area to the nearest bonfire as fast as possible. After those remains, you're gonna want to slide down this coffin, and then another coffin, go around right and dodge your way past the 2 tall skeletons. Lastly, slide down this large coffin and you should be safe. Once you turn to your left, you should be greeted with a nice view of Lost Izalith, which is an area we'll be exploring later, and a ladder leading to a bonfire. Climbing up the ladder and heading on forwards, you'll be greeted with Patches. Now, everyone knows about good old Patches. I know about good old Patches. He's a notorious trickster, and I know that he tricks you into looking down that ledge before pushing you. But I don't really know much about his dialogue, since during my first run through here, I didn't even talk to him and he still pushed me off the cliff. But I'm pretty sure there's a way to turn him into a merchant, I just don't know how to do it. Right now he just keeps apologizing to me.
I did you wrong, but I didn't mean it. These temptations, they can overcome me. You know what I mean, don't you? Please, forgive me.
Now, if you don't have a skull lantern, you might actually want to drop down here because there's a corpse that has it, and you can just pick it up. Fortunately, there aren't any giant skeletons down here, but you do encounter whatever this is. They're pretty easy to take out since all you have to do is hit them, dodge away when they start attacking, and when they stop attacking you hit them again, rinse and repeat. You don't want to get hit because they deal quite a bit of damage, but they have pretty low health as well, so again, by the time you arrive to this point of the game after acquiring the Lord Vessel, you should be more than capable of taking them down. On my first run through this place, I actually met with that priestess girl I met in episode 6 who, if you remember, was actually one of Petra's friends. She told me that her 2 guardians, Vince and Nito, were nearby and had gone hollow, so I promptly put both of them out of their misery, which was a bit hard to do in the darkness, but as long as you're careful, you can come out on top. And the priestess doesn't appear to be here anymore, so I guess she moved on. Next, there should be a tunnel nearby that you can find with 2 skeleton towers blocking the way. After getting past them, there should be a ladder. After climbing the ladder, you can go right and you should be back at the bonfire. Now trust me when I say this, but you're gonna want to kindle this bonfire until it gives you 15 flask charges, because you're gonna need it for the fight ahead. Continuing on, avoid jumping down the ledge again because you're done with that area. Hug the right hand cave wall and continue down that path where you'll eventually encounter something I don't want to fight. Unfortunately, you will have to get past that thing in order to get to Nito. You can fight it, they have around the same house as the normal giant skeletons, but they have more erratic attacks and they're scarier, so I just ran past them. You can learn their moveset if you want, but in my opinion, it's much more efficient to just run past. There's a fog wall in front of you, but it isn't the boss yet, it just opens up to another area. Cross it and you'll come across more enemies and crap, where do I go? Oh god, a giant archy skeleton and a black knight of all things to be down here. Oh no, goodness me, get me out of this hell! Ah! Well, that was something. I have to somehow find my way through that. The best word I can use to describe this whole area is unknown. This is because the whole time I was here, I made no attempt to explore around like I usually do, because I felt like I was actively being discouraged to look around. It's blanketed in total darkness, the enemies require you to be able to see in order to fight them. There are probably 100 more enemies hiding in the darkness, but heck if I know, I never stick around to find out. I just ran blindly through the area trying to find a path, a door, a torch, anything at all. But eventually, after stumbling around a bit, I found a ladder that led me to the path to the boss. If you, viewer, prefer to linger around the area a bit and fight the enemies, find alternate paths, and pick up items, then good luck and may your bravery stay true. I do know that if you kill the Black Knight, there's a chance that he'll drop his halberd, which I'm pretty sure is the strongest strength weapon in the game. But that's for you to find out, not me. Anyway, along the treacherously thin path to the boss, you'll be greeted with a view of Ash Lake. I actually think this view is really cool. Multiple impossibly tall trees stretching up to God knows where, rising over a seemingly endless ocean. I don't actually know where the real Ash Lake is. I know it's an area in the game you can get to, but I don't know where it is. Don't ask me. But I digress again. Back to the Tomb of the Giants. Through this cavern and onward, you'll no longer be needing your lantern because it's actually really well lit. Be careful when running through this path because a bunch of skeleton towers will rise up from the ground. Either run past them if you can or fight them. Past the towers will be two giant skeletons guarding your way forward, and honestly just run past these guys. They're not really in your way, and it's really inefficient to try and fight them. Now you're in the cave full of pinwheels. Don't worry about them too much. Their fireballs are easy to dodge and they're pretty weak themselves, but again I just ran past them. If you decide to head down, you'll eventually encounter these little baby skeleton things. Don't underestimate them because even though they're small and incredibly weak, if they manage to get a hit on you, you'll build up a bit of bleed. This area can seem like utter pandemonium, but it's actually really easy to get past. Just avoid the enemies, run up here, and you'll be at the fog wall to the boss easy and quick. You'll find Nito down that hole. Make sure you're prepared, after all you're fighting a figure of legend. And if you're ready, just drop down the hole and... Okay. The moment you jump down this hole, it plays a cutscene, but let me just linger here for a second. What is this stupid mechanic? First of all, the drop wasn't even high enough for my character to take that much damage. Second of all, why are they making you use an Estus before the boss fight even starts? I know what some of you might say. It's fall damage, it's a game mechanic, silly. When you drop from a certain height, you take damage. And yeah, I understand that, but right before a boss fight and from a pretty small drop? Seriously? Anyway, let's move on. I just wanted to rant about that for a bit. Looking at the cutscene, it doesn't take a genius to find out that we've been here before, when we went down to that Gravelord Covenant area. And soon enough, we get our confirmation that the figure in the sarcophagus was in fact Nito himself. And now, the boss fight starts. Make sure to drink an Estus right up. Okay, make that 2 charges. As you can see from the bottom left of my screen, I'm already quite low on flask charges, which is why I told you earlier to kindle the bonfire to 15. The Gravelord Nito boss fight has 2 glaring problems that you need to look out for. First, it was the sword that came out of the ground earlier, And secondly, you also need to pay attention to Nito's skeleton minions. They can be quite the roadblock. Well, that's alright. Time for round 2. I'll just run past this guy. Ow! Alright. Ow! That's cool, that's fine. Nothing a little Estus later won't fix. Oop. Well then. That's alright. It's just a little goofy mistake. I'll just run over here and um where's the ladder? Hello? Someone there? Please help me. Get me out of this hell. I'm lost. I'm lost. It took me quite a while to remember where I was supposed to go, but eventually I did find the way back to the boss, which is shocking considering all I did was run around in the vain hope that I'd find that ladder again. This time I made sure to kindle my bonfire again, so I got 15 flasks. Anyway, same old deal, I ran past the enemies and got to the fog wall, and before you know it, it was time for my proper second attempt against Gravelord Nito. Once again, heal until your health is full before the fight starts. And you might have noticed that I'm holding my Astora straight sword instead of my much stronger claymore. This is because the skeleton minions of Nito are much like the ones in the catacombs in the sense that they don't die permanently against normal weapons. You'll need a divine or holy weapon to deal with them. You'll see here that even after Nito uses some sort of death miasma AoE attack that kills the skeletons around him, they start reconstructing themselves after a few seconds, which means that if you try to dispatch the skeletons to get to Nito, they'll be alive and kicking again after a few seconds to surround and stunlock you to oblivion. I think you can guess my strategy here. I plan on isolating Nito by cutting down his minions using my divine sword. However, during this attempt at least, the plan turned out a bit difficult to pull off, because I hadn't upgraded the sword enough to deal significant damage. So while I was swinging away at one skeleton, another could have snuck up around me to land a blow. So this just ended up being a dance of sorts where I move around trying to isolate the skeleton from the group while Nito does that. And he did it again. One of the worst things you can do in this fight is to get greedy. There are multiple occasions where you can get yourself stuck in unfavorable positions by trying to land a cheeky hit on Nito at bad times. This happened to me in a specific instance where the skeleton minions were temporarily brought down after Nito used the AoE spell. Afterwards, I tried to stupidly get a couple hits off of him instead of distancing myself and trying to isolate him from his minions. This got me stuck in a corner, which gave the skeletons enough time to reform and, well, finish me off. Those last two attempts were pretty abysmal, but I felt like my strategy of killing the skeletons before engaging Nito was on the right track. So before I did round 3, I took a quick stop at the blacksmith and upgraded my Astora sword to a +4 using Twinkling Titanite. By two-handing it, it allowed me to slay the normal skeletons in 2 swings, and the giant skeletons in 3. This allowed me to make short work of the minions, and by doing so, isolate Nito. Remember those times when the sword rose up from the ground and hit me? At first glance, it may seem like they're impossible to dodge and random, but if you're attentive to the background noises, you might notice that there's a distinct screaming sound effect right before the sword comes out of the ground. See? So, that's both of those problems taken care of. After killing the last of the skeleton minions, I switched back to my claymore and focused on Nito, who might as well have been a helpless baby without his cronies. I'm not even kidding. This guy's the first of the dead, the Gravelord, the Grim Reaper of the Dark Souls world, but he's depressingly easy once you get the skeletons out of the way. Nothing's distracting you, so his melee swings are incredibly easy to dodge. His massive AoE attack takes a lot of time to wind up, so it's pretty easy to get away so long as you're aware of your surroundings. And even his rising sword spell is easy to avoid, since now you can just see the exact moment he punches his sword into the ground and when to dodge. Really though, this boss is such a joke that he reminds me of a normal enemy if it had the health equivalent of a boss. Most of his swings are pretty high as well, so oftentimes they'll miss right above your head without you needing to dodge. The only praise I can give to this boss is that his sword has really good hitboxes, and he's threatening, I guess. Anyway, with the boss mechanics out of the way, It's time to show this lord to his designated territory. After ending the life of the Lord of the Dead, we are rewarded with Nito's Lord Soul and a bonfire for our efforts. Thanks for your help, Astora Street Sword. I will never use you again after this fight. I warped back to Firelink Shrine in search of the priestess. I first checked to look if she was with Petrus, but she wasn't there. I next warped to the Undead Parish, thinking that since she was a priestess, maybe she'd be at a church, and what do you know? She's actually here. Hey, it's been a while.
Hello. I will never forget what you did. I am deeply indebted, for it was not within my power to save Vince or Nico. I cannot thank you enough. In case you have not heard, I am Rhea of Thorolund. I only wish there was some way I could help you, but I am inexperienced and I only know the art of miracles. If that could be of any help, speak to me again.
While I'm not really looking for any compensation, if you happen to rescue her earlier in the Tomb of the Giants, Rhea will start selling you miracles if the ones from Petrus weren't enough already.
Vince and Nico were fooled by a lout named Patches and
Classic
turned him to
Patches,
the Lord.
sorry.
My prayers did them no good. It is my ignorance and my frailty that has sealed their fates. Perhaps Petrus realized my weakness all along, and thus made the decision to abandon me.
Petrus did
I
what
must
now?
blame him now.
After hearing this, I went to Petrus to confront him about his cowardice. But there wasn't an option to do that, and I wasn't just gonna swing at a fellow warrior without proof of his crimes. So I guess I'll just leave that for another day. And this is where I'll end the video. I, Karlos, have successfully slain Nito, one of the four lords, and usurped his great soul. 3 lords remain, whose souls I will inevitably acquire. To this end, I will keep my head held high, my swords sharpened, and my will unbroken. I'll see you again, viewers.